Hey guys, and welcome back. So, you should have just listened to the last part of Save Me a Seat. What a great book. I think we can all learn some valuable lessons from that book. I really enjoyed how it was some different people's perspectives on the same day, so we could really see what each person was thinking and what their perspective was on the same event happening. So speaking of events, today we are going to really map out all of those big events that happened in Save Me a Seat in order to find a theme or a lesson that the author not only wanted to teach the characters, but to teach us as the reader. So follow along with me as we do this together. All right, so I have my reading journal out. You can, of course, get yours by to do this work with me. So today I want to teach you that readers teach others all about the theme of their independent books. And one way they do this is by practicing how they would describe the story's major events in order and plan the details they want to talk about that lead to the theme. So readers do this to explain how key details act like clues and contribute to the overall story. So it's almost like we're using some of those events and details that we talked about yesterday in order to kind of analyze them and look for a theme or a lesson learned in it all. So I'm going to do this by kind of mapping out some major events in order that I remember them from the story. So you could do this in form of a timeline. You could do it just by listing first, second, last. So I just did that by using sticky notes labeled with some of the events in that order. So as I'm thinking back to Save Me a Seat, one of the first events in the story was how Ravi came to America and he automatically assumed that Dylan wanted to be his friend just because he was also Indian. He noticed he was the only other Indian in his class, even though he called him an ABC Indian. And I think also since Dylan was winking at him, it kind of led him to believe that. The second event I thought of was how Ravi thinks Joe is not very smart because he is sent to Miss Frost. So he automatically assumes that because he's pulled out to go work with this other teacher, that he isn't as smart as the rest of the kids in the classroom. Okay, so then I thought about this event where Mrs. Beam, Joe and Ravi's teacher, sends Ravi to Miss Frost for extra help. So this is something we talked about yesterday, those details that she just thought he couldn't, nobody could understand him, so that meant that he couldn't speak English well, so that meant that he needed extra help as well. So now we're seeing kind of a pattern going on. I see Ravi assuming Dylan wants to be his friend. I see him now assuming that Joe isn't very smart when actually Joe is very smart. He just has that hearing problem where sounds are sensitive to him. And then now I see where Miss Beam is assuming that Ravi isn't very smart because she thinks he doesn't know English very well. So I see a pattern which makes me start thinking about our theme. The next event I'm thinking of is that Ravi does not want to believe that Dylan is the one that's being unkind to people. So remember, first he thought that Joe was the one who tripped him heading back to his seat when really it was Dylan, and that Dylan was the one stealing his pencils, and Dylan was the one who threw a ball at him and was being mean to Joe the whole time, but he just didn't want to believe that. He thought that that was his friend. And then the next event is where we see Joe and Ravi stay home from school and learn valuable lessons. So you kind of saw that part today when you were reading the rest of the story. So they both stayed home because they were having a tough time really with Dylan and not being treated correctly at school. But being at home, remember that Joe was able to really connect with his dad through a letter, and Ravi was able to learn a valuable lesson with his grandpa. And that kind of led to what they brought for that school project. And then the last event I talked about was how Joe and Ravi, they worked together to teach Dylan a lesson. So that's what ultimately caused them to become friends. They realized that he wasn't being very nice, and really based on that project that they brought to school, they were able to really teach Dylan a valuable lesson. All right, so now I've got all my events in order. I made sure to number them so I can see how things are changing. I see Ravi not treating Joe correctly. I see Joe assuming Ravi is kind of strange. Dylan kind of is mean to both of them. Even Mrs. Beam is assuming things that aren't correct. So now we want to think about what the theme is based on all of this. So I'm going to get kind of another sticky note out and think about how all these events really helped shape the theme of this story. So I might say that all of the major events in this story happened because no one was really taking the time to get to know one another. They were just all kind of judging each other based on their outward appearance or things that they just thought. So they treated each other poorly based on first impressions. So now I think, okay, so they treated each other this way based on their first impression. So now I really am thinking about a theme here. Because really they all, even the teachers and all of the students, Ravi, Joe, Dylan, they all treated each other a certain way based on their first impressions of each other without getting to know them. So I think the theme is not to assume things about a person before you know who they really are. So it almost goes with that saying that don't judge a book by its cover, that we really need to get to know the book and read the book to understand what the book is about. So same thing with people. We can't assume things about them before we actually get to know who they really are. So I think that all of these events in this story show that. Ravi assumed Dylan wanted to be his friend. Ravi thinks Joe was not smart. Mrs. Beam thought Ravi needed more help. Ravi didn't want to believe that Dylan was being kind of the bully, and then that's what really led to them all becoming friends, because they got to know each other really well through each of these events. And that led to our theme, where we should not assume things about another person before knowing who they really are. So today, my friends, you are going to do the same work with your independent reading book. So even if you're not finished with that book, you might already have an idea based on the events kind of what the theme might be. Or maybe it's a book that you did just finish and you already thought of a really good theme. So again, you'll map out those big important details in the correct order and then analyze it for a pattern and write about how that led to the theme or the lesson that the author wants us as the readers to learn. All right, happy reading. See you next time.